Do you want to get a fresh perspective on purchase and sales acquisitions? Do you understand the significance and value of handed-down craftsmanship and niche manufacturing in the United States? Richard Balka, President and CEO of the Home Rubber Company, is here to aid you in gaining appreciation for Trenton-based businesses that remained for a long time, as well as English major entrepreneurs. Today, he will make you nostalgic as you travel down memory lane and see Trenton's long-standing businesses. Richard, I want to thank you very much for coming on. I know you did a chamber event where you told us a little bit of the history of this. It was awesome, and I thought this would be great to share that. So can you tell us a little bit about the history, background of the Home Rubber Company and its significance to Trenton and how you got involved?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. And so it's funny, we were just talking about this offline. Through a very circuitous route, I came to Trenton. And the Home Rubber Company had been in business for 3 generations within a single family. I just so happened to meet a broker that was helping the 3rd generation owner sell the business at a time when he was ready to retire, realizing that neither of his daughters had an interest in the business, nor their husbands. So I kind of got lucky and hit a moment in time when the company was available.
Well, that's just amazing. I know it's been around a long time. So can you tell us a little bit about the rubber company and how it's managed to continue to be successful and to stay relevant? And obviously we have an ever-changing business environment, especially with what you're doing. You want to tell us a little bit about what you do and how it has actually changed a little bit over time,
Sure.
What you do?
First of all, a little bit of history. The Home Rubber Company goes back to 1881. We are either the oldest or the second oldest continuously operating rubber factory in the country. And Trenton, New Jersey, as some of the older locals know, was the capital for all rubber manufacturing in the United States prior to the Industrial Revolution. And what happened during the Industrial Revolution is a lot of Rust Belt cities lost their manufacturing businesses to southern and plain states, where they could spread out their manufacturing, create more efficient properties, and in some cases automate at that time. The Home Rubber Company, because the owners had been in the Trenton area for a very long time, had roots and realized that they did not want to move the business out of the area for that reason. And recognizing that the only way for them to stay viable as a manufacturer was to become a niche manufacturer. So what happened was, as the larger companies, Uniroyal and Daco and some of the other name companies that many of us have heard of, moved out of this area and began to automate and create commodity type products. The owners of the Home Rubber Company recognized that they needed to stay in a niche and become a custom manufacturer in order to stay viable.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about some of there's some specific craftsmanship that's involved in being in a niche? Because you're not doing the general automation thing. You guys actually have high skills. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's a differentiator between you and some of these other companies that are out there?
Sure. So we still manufacture with a great deal of touch labor. If you come in and see photographs of our factory from 142 years ago, you'll recognize a lot of the same operations and equipment. And what this means is that our workers need to learn how to ply up layers of rubber to build a hose, how to apply wire and fabrics to that, how to mold products, and that these skill sets need to be passed along from maker to maker in order to keep the continuity of the company going.
Well, that's amazing. So you do specialty things. You want to tell us a little about some of the types of specialties that you do and why it's important to have skilled labor do this as opposed to like running it down like a manufacturer, like what some of these other automated systems do? The difference between how that works?
The reality is that what we do is generally, we say to our customers, if you can find the product that solves your needs in someone else's catalog, go ahead and buy it. But as soon as you need to deviate from that commodity product, from that over-the-counter product, then we'll help you design it if you need us to. We'll reverse engineer a specification if it doesn't exist anymore. But it can be anything from... one of the fortunate things about the Home Rubber Company is that back in the late 80s, early 90s, rubber companies made everything from galoshes and rain gear to garden hoses and fire hoses, conveyor belting, and so on. And we still have all those capabilities. So examples of some of the things that we do, we make a lot of hoses for use in steel mills around the furnaces. These have to have fire-resistant covers to them. We make, just the other end of the spectrum is we make a type of bladder that goes inside of a fruit press that's used to make ice wine.
Really?
In the Niagara region and other regions similar to it, where it's just a big rubber bladder that sits inside a mesh cage, and the grapes go between the cage and the rubber. Mm-hmm. They inflate the rubber, and the pith stays in the cage, but the juice flows down underneath it.
That's awesome.
So we essentially can take on almost any type of job.
Well, it sounds like it's a very fascinating job because it sounds like every day you go to a new project, it's going to be just a little different, right?
Right, exactly. There's always something new and different. And
that's why I guess the skill set is so important. So, you guys decided to stay in Trenton. I know like the Northeast is known for like having, as you mentioned, losing manufacturing out of the area, but we still have a lot of manufacturing in the United States, but I think a lot of people don't realize that. So what do you think is happening as far as why did you stay in Trenton, and how are you adding to like the local economy by the fact that you have decided to stay here, and you and other industries have decided to stay here?
Well, first of all, let's talk about why we stayed in Trenton. There's a couple of reasons, and chief among them, I give credit to the former owner of the company and to the city, county, and state of New Jersey. The former owner had the opportunity to sell the business to a Florida-based company that had planned on just taking the customer list and a few pieces of equipment. And because of the Stokes family dedication to the area, they chose to hold on to the business and find another buyer, which turned out to be me. When I I'm originally a Philly guy.
Okay.
When I got into this project, got in touch with the local economic development folks who, within a very short period of time, put together a group with the city, the county, and back in the days of true community lending, they put us in touch with Core States Bank.
Sure.
And we were able to put that together. But there's a couple reasons to stay where we are. One is that, I bought this business in 1996, just at the beginning of globalization. Mm-hmm. And, fast forward a couple of years, and all these companies that had started out in Trenton and other Rust Belt cities wound up going over, they went from here to Akron, Ohio, and places like that. And then they wound up taking a lot of their manufacturing overseas. Mm-hmm. And just as you hear today, if an American manufacturer wants to be competitive, they have to be in a niche. fortunately for us, that niche had been created back in generation 2 of the home rubber ownership, when after the Industrial Revolution, they recognized that they weren't going to compete against the commodity manufacturers. So, things came full circle when a lot of manufacturing went to the Middle East and the Far East,
Right.
but we were already in our niche, so we were very fortunate in that respect.
Well, it's good that you stayed here. So how do you think your impact has helped the local economy by keeping this? Because Trenton used to be known for manufacturing,
Right.
and now it's a relatively small compared to what it used to be, I guess. Right.
Sure.
Right.
So obviously, because we're not automated, we count on a great deal of touch labor. We employ about 40 employees right now. We would like to expand that if the economy would give us some help finding good qualified people, but that's another story altogether. But most of our employees walk to work, so they're definitely local folks, and the company's been around for a long time and has been lived on and fed the Trenton manufacturing reputation for all of those years.
That's just awesome. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with Richard Balka, and we're talking about manufacturing in Trenton and the Home Rubber Company and how they've been here since, I guess, 1881, right? So
Correct.
That's awesome. That's just amazing. I can't even think. That's just almost an incomprehensible amount. That's just, there's a lot. It was a very different country back in 1881.
We were recognized by the city of Trenton, along with some other over 75 and over
Right.
100-year-old companies. I think we were only beaten out by one pork roll company.
Okay.
And God bless them.
It's hard to beat a Jersey pork roll, right?
Exactly.
So speaking of that, since you've got a couple other entrepreneurial businesses in Trenton, how do you guys do you guys communicate or work together? Or how do you is there any conversations about how to keep things going in Trenton and how to, because you guys are similar as far as your age goes. Did you guys ever talk to each other about this kind of stuff? Like staying in Trenton and trying to help Trenton out? And
unfortunately, not as much as I would have liked.
Okay.
And I mentioned to you that I'm a Philly guy.
Right.
The reality is we do very little business very locally.
Okay.
We sell all over the country. We
Right.
actually also export to Mexico and China.
Okay.
Which is kind of neat. But
That is neat.
because I'm not an indigenous Trentonian, although I was once married to one.
Okay.
I just have not taken advantage of some of the local networking that I might have done.
Okay.
But I have met the owner of Switlick Parachutes,
Right. Oh, cool.
among others, and I think those of us that are still here certainly feel a sense of commitment and attachment, and in other cases rely on a workforce that was born and bred and trained here to fulfill our missions.
Well, that's awesome. So now you're also an English major. You want to tell us how maybe that's helped in your career? Because this is very different than what you went to school for. How do you think that might have impacted how well you're doing today?
I think that the answer to that lies in a level of lack of direction during my college years. That
All right.
I went to a very broad-based liberal arts college in the Midwest, and the thing I enjoyed most was reading and writing and analyzing, and I believed what the career counselors kept telling me, that if you have a liberal arts education, you can master anything. Mm-hmm. Ironically, I got out of college. I wasn't one of those guys who gave a lot of thought to what I would do once I got out. But when I did graduate, I, using some family contacts, went and interviewed. I actually talked to the head of a very large chemical company in the Philadelphia area, and he said, "Oh, great! I'm I'm looking for people that aren't just engineers, because we have to, diversify our group here. And he organized to have me interview with two of his engineers. And I sat down in front of them, and they kind of stared at me, and they said, I understand, but what, I understand you're an English major, but what can you do for us? We're a chemical company. And I said, well, I am fully prepared to become an expert in any area that I need to be. And they looked at me and they said, no.
No.
So
Okay.
So I had I think one other interview like that, and then I said, well, this isn't going to work out. I better go make my own career.
Right.
And at that point, after a brief stint as a bartender, I started developing real estate in the Philadelphia area, and one thing led to another.
Well, I have to say, just from telling your storytelling, it sounds like communication's been a huge key to this whole thing, right? Because your ability to communicate, and I think that's a strong indicator of how people do. Just being a bartender, I bet you got good tips, right?
Actually, and
negotiating real estate, right? This is all communication.
We were talking about this offline a little bit before the program, but some of my during college and post college jobs. One was selling dictionaries door to door.
Right.
And, that was pure cold calling. We would walk up and down a business district of, it could be anywhere. We would be dropped off in the morning and picked up sometime late in the afternoon. And I could tell you a story about doing that on the Admiral Wilson Boulevard in Camden. But, but it's learning how to talk to people, to talk your way in the door. You learn objection answers when somebody counters you. And then bartending, I actually met people when I was a 20-something bartender that who were, lawyers and business people in the area that I still keep in contact with today. But overall, to your point about communication, you learn to talk with people. You learn to listen to people. Mm-hmm. You learn to read people. These are all important skills. And whether you're negotiating or selling or, just being poised enough to ask for help when you need it, I think these are all parts of the communication skill set.
Well, I think you just point out something really important for young entrepreneurs. I know this is something I struggled with, is asking for help from others. Because I think when you start off, you're like, I need to learn how to do everything.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the thing I've learned now is I need to know enough to know how to direct somebody else to do something in another area, but I don't need to be the expert.
Right. Or
nor do I have the time.
Right. Or so. I need to know where to go.
Right.
To start that network trajectory toward the person who ultimately can help me.
Yeah, and the network, I think that was huge too. You talked about how you develop a network, and I assume you're probably still developing your network today, right? I'm assuming that's how you continue to grow the sales, especially when you're dealing with a niche, right? If you're making bladders for one company and these are all specialty products, so how do they must be referring you. So that must be an interesting dynamic when you're dealing with something very niche-y. So if I have a very niche-y product that I'm buying from you, who am I referring to? I mean, how are we helping you as clients, and how is that referral source building? Whereas if I was buying the same thing, it was well, he needs one of those too.
Right.
In your case, nobody needs what I need, right? They'll need something a little different.
Right. And the sales challenge for us, and by the way, you're never going to get a guy working in a steel mill referring you to the local ice wine maker, but the reality is, we sell predominantly through distribution around the country. There are associations that these guys work with. They do refer business back and forth, but the challenge of our sales initiative is, because we're not needed on a regular basis, we have to stay point of mind for any of our customers for when those custom products come up. And that's been our biggest sales challenge, and always will. If you're a commodity manufacturer, you're regularly in contact with your biggest customers, and seeing purchase orders every day and that sort of thing. We certainly have customers that are like that, but we also have customers that we hear from once every 3 years.
Right.
But when the advantage of having been around since 1881 is that our reputation for being a problem solver exists out there. And so, somebody leaves one company and goes to another company, and they remember, hey, we used to buy this from Home Rubber. Or they pick up a phone and call someone that they know in the industry, and they say, hey, try Home Rubber. They can do this.
That's just awesome. So any other, so what do you see some distinct products that you make? I mean, I know you talked about a little bit about this. So what other things do you guys problem solve and manufacture there?
Okay. We'll try to go from the sublime to the ridiculous.
Okay.
We've made some 6-inch thick bumpers that are stops for trains at the end of the rail line. Okay. We have made a tugboat bumper that was about 2,800 pounds. It was basically an incredibly large piece of rubber tubing with about a 4-inch thick wall that got wrapped around the front of a tugboat to act as a bumper. We've made, for people that collect antique cars and fire trucks and things like that, we've made the hoses, because the way we make them is the way they were made when the fire trucks were first built. So they have what's known as a fabric or a wrap impression on the outside diameter of them. We make, if I can say this on the radio, what we defined as the piss hose, which was an incredibly flexible hose that was used on the urinals of trains.
Interesting. Never knew there was such a thing.
And one of the products that we make, the things that we export, we and we didn't get into this, but a couple of years ago, I bought another company called the Ivanhoe Rubber Company back in 2008. Ivanhoe is also a niche manufacturer and sells uncured rubber to companies that mold and extrude with it. And Ivanhoe, among other things, makes the rubber that is used for the plugs and sockets of wire harnesses for the space shuttle.
Oh, wow.
The rockets, missile systems, and pretty much every airplane you've been on since you've been on any.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of anything that comes up.
That's really cool. We're going to take another quick break. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with Richard Balka, and we're talking about lots of different interesting things, from urinals on the train to bumpers on tugboats to I had no idea how many things you are involved in, and in the shuttle. I have not been on the shuttle, but
I was going to say before you got to that, my wife has often told me that I crossed the line in some of the things that I say. So I apologize if I offended anybody with my I'll call it honesty.
It sounds like you're just a Philly guy to me. Is what it sounds like to
exactly.
me. So. No, it's awesome. So I know, as any company had to deal with the last couple of years when we had the shutdown, or during the pandemic. How did a company like yours, which was really, you were kind of tied in that whole supply chain issue, you didn't have materials, you didn't have employees. I mean, how did you manage that whole process, and what adjustments did you make, and what kinds of things did you learn through that process?
Well, the first thing I learned was how grateful I was to be declared an essential business. My wife works from home as an attorney, and the thought of the two of us trying to work out of the same house for any period of time was really disconcerting. And truth be told, I have never liked working from home. I have to be out and around people. So when we were going through the list, and and the government's announcements of what businesses were considered essential, my wife and I were both ecstatic and obviously pleased. But it was interesting because we, like many businesses, we took extra steps cleaning. We rotated our office staff who was working from home and who wasn't. We got better at the IT stuff that had to go on. But there were also stresses for, even though it was where I wanted to be and that I wanted to obviously continue operating, there were stressors around coming to work every day, worrying about whether or not somebody in the factory would get sick. What would that mean? I heard horror stories from other business owners who spent thousands, $20,000, $30,000 cleaning their factories because after somebody got sick, because nobody at that point really understood what was creating all this. But we, our guys came in every day. We, oddly enough, nobody in the factory ever contracted COVID that we were aware of, and the office staff who was rotating in and out of there, we actually did have a few people that got it. But I give a lot of credit not only to to our guys for continuing to come in, but not being coward by it, continuing to work through it, and so on. As far as the supply chain issues, we were very fortunate when, again, to being a U.S. manufacturer, where a lot of the supply chain issues came from manufacturing overseas not being able to get their product to the U.S., we saw an uptick in business. Mm-hmm. And I'm not suggesting, and this is a whole other soapbox, that the U.S. can ever onshore all of the manufacturing we need to keep our country where it is from an economic standpoint. But a lot of businesses ran into real problems, and those of us that were able to get product in and get raw materials in and get product out the door were very fortunate. We really didn't see significant supply chain issues until really toward the end of the pandemic. And I'm not sure why that was. I think if I had to guess, it's a combination of multiple factors, some being the fact that goods were in such supply that some of the commodity raw materials that we count on coming from the Far East were not valued enough to make it onto the ships that were getting here. Oh. Some of the issues were coming from factories overseas retooling, shutting down shifts, and so on. And what happened was, early on in January of, I guess it was 20, we saw a huge dip in orders, as most people did, because everyone was sort of stepping back and going home and whatever. But over the next couple of months, we saw demand spike. And then what we have seen, and for those people in my industry that I talk to, they're saying the same thing. As prices kept rising so rapidly, customers started buying more and more goods with and trying to lock in before those price increases hurt them. And the spiral was that increased demand, and so that is one of the things that's led to the inflationary period that we're in now. But it was a roller coaster.
Wow. Yeah. That's eased up a little bit lately, right? That cycle, hasn't it softened a little?
It has softened a little. We're seeing both overseas freight and domestic freight coming down a little bit. I'm actually not amazed, but upset by how many calls we get every day from logistics companies trying to get our business that, you couldn't even get on the phone 18, 20 months ago.
Right.
But it's funny because just today I saw one of our raw material suppliers, chemical-based products. I got a letter today saying, we're reducing the price of such and such. We haven't seen a ton of it, but little bits here and there, I think. No one is bringing the price or the cost down as much as they took them up.
Not to 2019, right? Right?
But we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, no. So that's interesting. So how did you manage the employees through this whole process? Sounds like everybody kept working.
We kept it going. We, like many businesses, took advantage of the COVID funding that was available from the government. We didn't lay anyone off, particularly in the factory. What we didn't do was travel for sales, which is something that we were used to doing. And that was probably created the biggest change for us. But that being said, again, the advantage of being a company with a 142-year-old reputation is that we found in the past we can stay off the road for periods of time without being hurt too much. And so, our guys stepped up and got everything done that needed to get done.
So after going through the pandemic period, has anything changed from a business perspective? I mean, do you still travel less and maybe do more, quote, Zoom calls? I mean, has anything shifted a little bit? Because we all learned a little bit during the process. Some things were positive.
Right.
So any things you added to it that maybe was a positive from this whole episode?
Well, certainly, the technology of Zoom meetings and so on has improved life dramatically. The reality is, I'm in a transition where I'm actually looking for a new sales manager, and I will leave it up to that individual when they're hired how much travel we're going to do, whether we sell through direct sales versus reps around the country and so on. But definitely, companies, our distributor customers, they didn't want us to show up any more than we didn't want our guys getting on airplanes, and so everybody in the industry learned to work a different way, and that's not changing anytime soon.
Well, that's good. So, anything else from the pandemic period that you want to talk about that we figured out?
I think we just about covered it,
right,
other than learning to wash our hands 42 times a day, which...
And hopefully people continue to do it.
Exactly.
I was amazed how many people didn't wash their hands beforehand. Unfortunately, some of them are going back to that. So, yeah, definitely sanitary is really really an important part of that. So, now what about the impact of U.S. manufacturing base? Now they talk about I realize that we can't bring all manufacturing back to the United States because it is a world economy. But what about the focus of bringing at least certain critical infrastructures back to if we have a shutdown like this, at least maybe we can make masks, or maybe we can make some basic components, maybe some drugs that are necessary. It's
funny you mentioned masks. The one last piece on the pandemic is there was a local group across the river in Morrisville, Pennsylvania, that was sewing cloth masks when masks weren't available, and of course all of the sewing stores ran out of the white stretchy elasticy stuff,
right?
And I don't know how she found me, but we started making essentially rubber bands that they could use in place of the elastic.
If it has rubber in the name, you can make it, right?
Exactly. But anyway, to your point, it's a struggle because there are things we don't want to make here.
Right.
We don't want, we have areas like Louisiana, the Gulf region, where we've pushed a lot of the chemical manufacturing that that other areas didn't want and shouldn't have had in their backyards because it was too close to residential areas. And the irony of manufacturing back when all of the older companies started was that the most efficient place to locate your big manufacturing facility was along a waterway. And of course, dumping into those waterways, and we know all the problems that's caused. There's certainly, to your point, there are certainly products that we need to be able to either make here or amass here. Mm-hmm. And do we need to be able to make masks? I can't answer that.
Right.
If we
well,
can
just an example,
right? If we can stockpile them,
right.
We need to be able to maintain our food supply.
Right.
Certainly, we need to be able to, as we're seeing with chips and computer. We certainly need to be able to protect ourselves from if they're that prevalent in all of the things that we use to function on a daily basis. No question about it.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. I hope those conversations are happening between industry leaders and the government at some level, but we're going to take another quick break where you're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm with Richard Balka, and we're talking about a long 142-year history of manufacturing, which is incredible, all the way from the very, very beginning. And now we went through the pandemic. We learned a lot through that. And you guys make all kinds of interesting things, all the way from the shuttle down to the trains to the tugboats to... I think it's just incredible that you guys are
mask elastic.
And mask elastic, right? Exactly. So pretty much rubber is, you put rubber in there is, I never realized just how diverse a company could be about. I just assumed different people made different things, but you guys can make it all, which I think is really cool in of itself. And it's basically 40 employees can make almost anything that's rubber.
Exactly.
That to me is amazing. Just that whole idea is amazing to me.
From raw chemical through mixing to finished product.
That's just, I personally find that fascinating as an engineer. I think that's really cool. So that's the first 142 years. So what do you see happening, maybe not 142 years out, but how about the next 10, 20, 30 years? What do you see kind of happening? Because you're a niche, right? But you obviously have automation. We have things like AI coming out. We have all these other things happening in the world, so to speak. How do you think that's going to impact you as a business?
Boy, you had to bring AI into it, didn't you?
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. Everything seemed so clear until AI came on the scene, didn't it?
Oh, I guess. Yeah, definitely.
I guess first you have to ask yourself from an economic standpoint what's going to happen. And I don't know about you, but, I periodically go to association events, and there's always an economist there. And they always say the one thing that's certain is change.
Right. They get paid a lot of money to say that too, by the way.
Right. Exactly.
It's the same message.
And there's I've heard enough of them to have some takeaways that I think you can go on. Cycles obviously constantly exist in home rubbers history and the discussion around how we became a niche manufacturer. That's certainly a cycle. The economic rises and falls, the highs and lows, those are the cycles we're always going to see. But the challenge is nobody can predict how deep or how high any of them are.
Right.
Where I struggle today is that, I see a lot of people confusing the stock market with the economy. And then you hear, well, the stock market's rising because of tech stocks, or the stock market's falling because of tech stocks. I consider the home rubber company and companies within our environment to be bellwether economic indicators. Steel, concrete, construction, mining, these are food. These are where my customers and their customers live. And the reality is that when everyone's talking about a recession over the past 6, 9, 12 months, everyone in my industry was reporting record sales, record demand, and at the last trade show I went to back in it was in early May of this year. The term you kept hearing is, as long as we don't talk ourselves into a recession, there won't be a problem.
Right.
Now, that being said, inflation is horrible. There's no question about that. And yet, I think it was, it is the unfortunate outcropping of the necessity of keeping the economy going during COVID. While there may have been waste and there may have been theft, and I'm sure there was, I don't fault the government for the approach that they took there. I just think it's going to take a while for all of that cash in our economy to level out. And unfortunately, you get me talking, and I start going in different directions at various points. But the other, from my standpoint, and I think we see this more here in the Northeast than other parts of the country. The other thing that is a cycle that needs to swing back is we need, in my personal opinion, a cycle that feeds our middle class. Mm-hmm. And one of the brighter economists that I heard describe this went through a series of charts and data and so on that showed that the biggest threat to our GDP is not having a strong middle class. There's been a cycle, I'm not good with years, but it's probably 25, 30-year cycle of broadening the gap between the upper class, the 1% and all the buzzwords that we hear. I think that will come back to haunt us because that, I should probably stop and think my way through this, but I don't think the economy is driven by that 1% in terms of their need for the sorts of regular demand items that generally drive our economy as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's like if you look at, if you go back and look at the stores Target and Bed Bath Beyond that are struggling now, and you hear that what their problems are is, there was a whole bunch of money all at once. Right. And so everyone went out and bought a new blender. But you only need one blender every 5 years. Right. So, it doesn't sustain it. But if everybody had gone out and bought a house, or if everybody had gone out and if we got the money into the hands of people that needed it on a daily basis for food, for housing, for those sorts of things, it would continue to churn in the economy. And I'm sorry, because clearly I am going off on my soapbox.
You're right. I mean, the middle class. It's called the velocity of money. The middle class tends to spend money more as a higher percentage of what they have, whereas the wealthy tend to hold it and invest it, and they don't necessarily spend it. So, like a middle class person will do what you say. They'll buy groceries, and then that grocery person at that store makes an income, and they go and spend the money. So the more, and that's where people forget that the most of the wealth actually exists in the middle class. And the stronger the middle class is, the more it supports everybody, right? Because they provide the goods and services to the 1%ers, and they also provide the services to those who are disadvantaged and need help, need a hand up, right? So to help them get out of poverty. But yeah, you're right, and you're right. That divergence has been continuing to spread, and there is some concern there. I mean, and so we have to pay attention to it. I don't know if anybody knows the actual answer yet, but you're right. We have to find ways to better to suit it. And it's interesting to me is that, and you see this as an employer, is it seems like we have these job openings, but they're not filling as quickly, which is an interesting dynamic where we're paying people more money, but they're not necessarily running to come get the jobs either yet.
Well, and
which is interesting to me.
Yeah, I mentioned to you during the break, I'm an NPR junkie,
Right.
and recent stories around, population decline.
Right.
We demographics just came out. Our median age is about 4 years older than it was the last time the study was done. We don't have the people to fill the jobs. So if you don't, if we don't figure out how those people are going to get here, we can't expect the economy to grow other than through, and I've avoided AI this whole time,
Okay.
other than through the sort of automation that maybe AI would be able to pick up. But I don't think anyone at this point believes that AI can fill the sorts of jobs that we're struggling to fill now.
Yeah, I think that's one of those big, interesting areas that all of us it's going to happen quickly. We're just not sure exactly what's going to happen.
And in my business, and I've been thinking about this,
Yeah.
I could use AI if I didn't want to have people answering phones, for instance.
Right.
I could use AI to design a hose, which is an
Right.
engineering, calculation. But, I can't use AI to build that hose.
Right.
So I don't know. We'll see it come and go.
I think initially it's going to be an augmentation. Like we'll use it as another tool.
Right.
And there's still the person. It'll be like that 90-10, where maybe AI will do 90%, but there's still a person's going to be involved at
Right.
some level, and they might handle the grunt work of helping you do the basics, but somebody still has to do the final. Okay, this is what we're going to do. So
Right, and guys like you and me,
Yeah.
the middle-aged white guys, will be the last adapters, and so it'll all,
Right.
Younger kids who can understand it, they'll teach us how, and we'll just sit back and watch.
We'll just have to watch it. So this has been an awesome hour. So any final words before we do you want to give words of advice and words of wisdom?
I have no advice other than be optimistic and look out for others, take care of other people, and they'll take care of you. And thank you. I've enjoyed chatting, and if anybody was willing to pay attention to any of this, I hope I kept you awake.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. I appreciate you've been listening to Master Your Finances. Please go to www.masteryourfinance.us and subscribe there, and want to have a wonderful day.